All right, welcome ASOS fans, the few of you that exist.
The three.
The three. Well, no, we've got over 10 subscribers, so I don't know, and I've been
Well, four of them is us.
sorta, I guess. Whatever. Stop crapping all over me trying to give ourselves some props. We need to. You fake it till you make it, James. But
All right.
in whatever. In all seriousness, thank you for tuning in. I know that there's a lot happening right now. I mean, the pandemic is one thing, but I think right now what's in everybody's consciousness is what's happening in Minneapolis, especially on the heels of what happened with the George Floyd situation in Minneapolis. But on top of that, we have like what's happened recently as far as like the Breonna Taylor situation, as well as Ahmaud Arbery. We've mentioned this on the podcast, at least some of this on the podcast as it's been going, but I know that my heart's been weighing really heavy. There's a lot of emotions that have been going through me. I know that talking to James, there was a lot that he was thinking about as well. And before we just came on here and just let like the emotions spill out, I think that what we were trying to do is figure out how to contextualize like what's happening, but within like the wheelhouse of sports. Because I think sports has been an extremely important thing for society, and it's there have been a lot of times where a lot of what's happening in society as far as like justice and social justice have had crossroads with a lot of what's happening in sports. And I think what's a lot of people don't necessarily talk about is they think it's like this new thing as far as like the Colin Kaepernick thing, or some people talk about like the Michael Jordan situation deal as far as him, how prevalent he was as far as activism or not. I think that that's sort of been something where I think people lack the historical context for what's happening. And in my conversations with James, I know that you've been doing a lot of research as far as over history, a lot of athletes stepping out and being activists for different social issues, or whether it be issues in their sport or anything. And I think that this could be an opportunity to kind of get into a lesson about like what's going on, and try to get people more illuminated on some things that have been happening. And I'm sure before we wrap it up, we'll get to like how it is that we're going through everything that's happening as far from an emotional standpoint. And I think what also is extremely important when you're listening to like the Jason Whitlocks and stuff talk about what happens next and what we should do next. And hearing a lot of athletes right now, I think that there are a lot of questions as far as like where we go from here. But yeah, I think that we want to do kind of like a history lesson here for us right now. So I guess I'll play the intro and then we'll get into it, right?
Yep.
That'll work. All right, cue up the intro.
I mean, ultimately, it's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust. People aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I put that together. I made it try to seem as though it was somebody else that did it. That's my work. Original music by me too. Just saying.
All right, YouTube. Pay attention, YouTube.
YouTube
Original.
fan session. There's no copyright anything with that, right?
Mhm.
But I think it was powerful as far as like just showing what it is that was happening nowadays, and really kind of going off of some of the most outspoken guys in the intro, as far as like starting out with Colin Kaepernick and just what he was protesting. But we'll get to Colin, we'll get to LeBron, we'll get to all of these other guys. But what I want to do is I want to look over history, and I know you've been doing the research, James. Like, what kind of brought you to the point where you were kind of looking into like the historical context of all of it?
Well, with everything that's going on today, you hear all these different conversations. People are saying all this other like random stuff about, yeah, why are they doing all this stuff now and all this other stuff. And someone tried to get into an argument with me about it. And I was like, well, they're not the first to do this. And my family has been teaching me these type of things since I was a kid. So when I was going to family like Christmas parties, I would get quizzed on certain things, and if I got it right, I would get my Christmas present early.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
So,
good.
my family is very proud in our history and the things that we've done. I'll give you a quick example. Rosa Parks stayed at my uncle and aunt's house when she was doing a speech for the NAACP.
Yeah, I thought it was probably that one, not the other one. Was she an athlete? No, I'm joking.
Hey, but yeah. So in this, I wanted to make sure that I wanted to start the conversation. Like we wanted to start the conversation with you as you watch this video, and like once you finish, do your own research. Look at some of the people that we mentioned, and look at all the other things that they've done, and look at the people that are connected to them that we did not mention, because we can't mention everybody. It's a lot of people, and they've done a lot of things. So the stuff that we don't mention, like don't get too upset with us, because we're still learning ourselves. So
I think that's a big part of it. Like you lit a fire under me to kind of go and do the research, because I think a lot of people know a lot of the big names, and we'll probably mention a few of them. But you gave me this list of people, and like while I've known the names, I don't necessarily know what it is they did, which I think speaks to that historical context, right? As far as like seeing how successful they are with their activism or what have you. Which, I mean, the point is the fact that you would take the initiative to do anything because you believe in something is something that we should all strive for and have principles for. But when I say that you lit a fire, it's like I want to do the research too. Now, I try to on purpose not do the research last night because I didn't want to pretend that I was some expert on all this stuff. Not saying that you are an expert on all this stuff. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to gas you up that much. We're set expectations, right? So
yeah, I know some, not a lot.
You know some. But see, that's the thing, is that you're lighting the fire. Like, I know that after this, after we wrap up and I finish 12 hours of editing, that I'm going to start looking more into this, because I want to know really the standard bearers and our forebears as far as people fighting for certain rights. And a lot of those rights overlap with what me and you care about. And and I'm sure we'll talk about more of that from the personal standpoint. But I think the first name that a lot of people think of when it comes to historical context would be Jesse Owens, but I think a lot of people are already aware of what Jesse Owens did as far as the protest back in the Berlin Olympics. But there's another name that I think a lot of people know of, and you look at the picture and you do this and you think about John Carlos. But what a lot of people remember is that there's more than one guy in that photo doing that. And while Tommy Smith, you gave me the list. I wanted to go through, like, John Carlos's name popped up immediately for me. I'm like, all right, I went right back to it. I think I did this as soon as you said. But tell me about Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Really.
They were both right there with. I mean, Tommy Smith was right there with them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was. What for people that don't know, what were they fighting for?
Racial equality. As a lot of people, like, we've been fighting for the same thing for so long, and if you do this, like, it all goes back to the same thing in the beginning.
Yep.
So Black Panthers and Jesse and John Carlos and Tommy Smith.
Because I'm like, what, 1968? So this is right around like the height of what we're talking about as far as like the civil rights movement, and everybody understands or knows that there's this racial inequality that's happening. There's a lot of the bigger names. This is the heyday of like the aftermath of the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King civil rights era. This is when Rosa Parks is staying at your family's house sort of era, in a sense.
And people are fighting back.
And I think that was a huge moment as far as like seeing them on that sort of national stage.
We just whipped y'all ass, and we're protesting.
So we're the best at what we do, and we're still protesting in the sense of it too. Do you know of any sort of backlash or anything that they experienced after they were doing it?
Well, I'll say this. Societal norms have a history of being ignorant, right? So the people say like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be protesting and all this other, and now their kids are looking at those people as heroes. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to continuously happen. It's going to be the same shit is just going to keep happening over and over.
Yeah, it takes a few to kind of step outside of what's happening societal wise, and they get that pushback. But all said and done, they're looked upon in like I won't necessarily say they're heroes to certain people, right? Because I'm sure there are certain people that take their story and, for lack of a better term, whitewash it into make it more palatable for other people and not necessarily what it is they stood for themselves.
Yeah, to make people feel good, somewhat.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think everybody kind of knew about John Carlos, but I want to make sure that everybody kind of knew about Tommy Smith there as well.
Yeah.
Now,
like, because he came in second. Come on, man.
Winners matter, James.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Nelly said.
You're quoting Nelly now? Quote some Ludacris for me. He won in the battle anyway.
No, he did win.
He won.
I blame the Wi-Fi though.
Yeah, they were part of Teddy Riley's Comcast plan.
And he was in the chat too, talking about, I can't believe this. I was like, you did the same thing. What you talking about?
See, we're still trying to keep it light. You got to smile through all the other stuff that's going through.
Because I mean, if you don't, like, yeah.
Wow, I felt like I deflated the shit out of your balloon just now. Damn.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, let's go to somebody else on the list that you gave me. All right, we're all familiar, at least with Jackie Robinson. Movies, all kinds of things as far as Jackie Robinson. But tell me about his brother.
All right, so Mac Robinson was an Olympic athlete as well, right? And I believe he was there with Jesse Owens. If I'm wrong, check it and comment and tell me. And the crazy part about that is, at that time, being an Olympic medalist didn't really hold like as much weight. Really? So when he came back, he couldn't like find a job. And this is a story I heard, which is legendary. So the only job he could really get was cleaning up like around like white neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. So in his protest to that, when he was cleaning, he wore his Olympic jacket. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And then I guess the people in the neighborhood didn't take too kindly to it. So they called the cops to make him take it off.
Really?
Like, I come here, like, I represent the country. I come back. I can't get a job. So the best thing I could do is like cleaning up like neighborhood streets and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, no. I wear the jacket. And then he had a brother, you know, kind of did some great things.
Kind of, just sort of.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
But I mean, everybody knows as far as like Jackie Robinson and what he stood for and breaking the color barrier in baseball in the face of all of the crap that he had to kind of wade through and to get through just to be equal on the baseball diamond. Probably not equal because he was better than pretty much everybody else out there. But
and I feel as though there are hundreds of examples of players at that time that would have been superstars.
Absolutely.
That we never got to see because of people's viewpoints, ignorant viewpoints at that. So.
Yeah, it's why you look at like the Baseball Hall of Fame, and then you try to look at like some of the Negro League players, and I'm glad it's not the MLB Hall of Fame, right? Like it's open more than that, because yeah, I mean, if they had let a lot of the guys from the Negro League come into it would have completely changed the way that we look.
Yeah, and some of the people that people are championing, like saying like, oh, they're the greatest, they probably weren't.
Right.
Yeah, they really weren't.
Because that's the thing, is like you gotta, in order to prove that you're the best, you have to have the best talent. And if you have probably some of the best talent not playing there, then it's like that. But it's insane to think that you have somebody like Jackie Robinson that's just like revered figure nowadays. But you go back to, what was it, Branch Rickey, and the owner of the team back then. And you look at everything that he had to go through and still know that his brother, an Olympic athlete, somebody that's on like that level with Jackie, still has to come back and clean, and the only job, the only gig he can get at that particular point in time is cleaning out white people's houses, and to try to at least get people to give him some sort of iota of respect. Here's my Olympic jacket, and it's like, no, you can't be proud of like what you've accomplished or what you've done. We want you to just go back to doing what we want you to do.
Right, because I think a lot of times when if you think you're better than someone and they do something that's greater than anything you'll ever accomplish in your life, you feel that.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're just not humble.
No.
Yeah. So
I think that's a very poignant thing that you just said. No, thinking about it in that context.
Yep.
All right, next up are I'm probably going to group these guys. You might talk about some of them more than others, just because I know that everybody at least knows these names. I think that everybody at least knows of one or two things that they've done. But this is all in that time period in the '60s that we're talking about, as far as which kind of feels like what's happening right now, which is like you have these eras where you have like movements that are starting to come up. So we talk about like during the civil rights movement, Vietnam, things around those areas. There was a very, very poignant time in American history. But Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay, as he was named a lot of time back then, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown. Speak on some of those guys.
The infamous picture, like I really want that I want that like framed in my house. The Cleveland Summit, where Muhammad Ali's announcing that he's not going to fight in the Vietnam War, and you got all these great players sitting next to him supporting him, and then you got other like all-stars sitting in the background, and that just like I've seen that picture ever since I was a kid once again, and excuse my ignorance, but I didn't know that much about Bill Russell. I didn't really get into basketball until I moved back into the States in like 96, 98.
Where were you before?
I lived all throughout Europe. I was born in California. Pops was in the Air Force. Then I moved all throughout Europe, and then I came to Maryland, PG County.
See, California is still sticking with you with what you're wearing, but okay, keep going.
Yeah, of course, like forever. Like they don't change. Thick and thin.
Fair enough.
I survived Jamarcus Russell. I'm here for life. There's nothing worse.
Cannot deny that.
And Bill Russell's from Oakland. Wow. Not bad. 11 championships, right?
Yep.
So like the only memory I really have of him was just like the picture with him like with like his hands up in all the rings and stuff like that. I didn't know how much of an important figure he was. And after this, I'm gonna look into more stuff. Because
what did you learn so far?
When people talk about like how do we make a change, he was doing what a lot of people say we should be doing, right? He was affecting bills, like changing laws, like talking to the right type of people to make actual change. And when you look at all the interviews of people talking about him, the main thing that they were saying was he was very controlled. He wanted to get his point across with logic, not anger, right? So he could be very upset about something, but he would be very strategic of how he would get his point across, right? And then you can look at some of the things where I think the Celtics were in Kentucky, and I think it was 1961, and it was an exhibition game, and all the black players were refused service at businesses and hotels. So they're like, nah, we're not playing here.
Right.
And just cancel the exhibition game. Stuff like that. And there's other players who've done that, who I'm sure we'll talk about.
I know Bill Russell, I mean, playing in Boston back then.
And he hated it. And like he didn't give out any autographs, which I understood. He's like, the only person I'm supposed to be to cheer up and to motivate is my kids. I was like, okay.
Can you imagine someone taking Bill Russell's position today?
What do you mean?
So, like, in the sense of, I mean, it's not necessarily equal, right? Because, I mean, right now, I don't see any athletes or professional basketball team being denied dinner or service at a
Right.
particular restaurant, right?
Mhm.
But the idea of, and I don't want to skip too far ahead, but the idea of like an athlete or a team saying, we're not even going to play right now because of this particular thing. Or you have a player who's just so fed up with what's happening that they don't sign autographs, or because I'm
Well,
sure if
that
you
almost
looked at
happened. You remember with the Clippers and Donald Sterling, that almost happened.
right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, like Chris Paul has been at the forefront of a lot of stuff too. So all these people, we need to give them their flowers because they're, and even after they retire, like two examples I have is Shannon Sharp and Marcellus Wiley. When these issues come up, they're still fighting for us. They're still being a voice for us.
Right.
Because if you look at all, like a lot of the executives in TV and everything like that, they don't look like us. They don't have our same experiences. So if you want, like, you can't have somebody who's never experienced anything that we have to get our point across. So we will never be understood. You need someone like us there to be our voice. And looking at the way that Shannon Sharp handles things, great. Same thing with Marcellus Wiley.
I sure we'll talk more about that as far as like what's happening with the media and
Yeah.
everything. Do you know of any like the backlash to? I'm sure some people like Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
You've watched the movies. You've probably seen the documentaries, things like that. As far as the backlash that he faced back then, which
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of people, especially a lot of white people, maybe conservative, whatever, that were just calling for all sorts of boycotts and all kinds of things for these guys, or the term that you see on every almost YouTube channel is stick to sports,
Yeah.
or what have you. It's like entertain us, but I don't want to hear you speak, right?
Right. And
So it's
I'll say one more thing about Bill Russell. I forgot.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you know this, but another thing that supposedly happened was the FBI had a case file on him, right?
I did not
And
know that.
he was called the arrogant Negro.
Huh.
The FBI did a lot of stuff, like, so
I'm
I'll just leave it
interested
at
in
that.
some of the more information as far as like what bills he got passed and like what kind of, because it seems like he was almost a not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like he was as loud necessarily as an activist as some of the other people were. Like, did he do more stuff behind the scenes than he was as far as like just
He
outward?
did a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but you also got to remember like where he was at the whole time. And another thing is like he moved his family like 16 miles out of Boston when he was playing there, and they were the only black people in the neighborhood.
Hmm.
So you got to remember that you're by yourself,
Right.
and at that point in time, you can't really depend on anybody to have your back. So, and you got a family to worry about too.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that's my fault for not knowing, because I remember seeing two specific bills that he had a hand in, like he was helping get passed, just based on like being vocal about it, like
Yeah, showing support.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll put it in the description.
No, I mean we'll find it out, but I mean there's a lot of people still left on the list, and like I said, is that we're not necessarily experts on any of it, right?
Oh, not at all.
As much as we just know that, like, hey, there's some guys out there that we know that have meant a lot and have done a lot, and we kind of, like you said, I love that phrase, give them their flowers, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, no, I could see that. I could see that in a lot of ways. All right, now moving on to another athlete that you have on the list, and I know of his name a lot because I know what he's done is at least athletically to a certain degree. And going down to Richmond, Virginia, they have the statue after they removed the Confederate statues. But what about Arthur Ashe?
Okay, so one of the main points that when I was looking him up was that there was a tennis match, I think in '73, that he was trying to get played in South Africa, right? It's during apartheid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the commentary at that time was calling him like a coon and all this other stuff. People were pissed at him because it's like, why are you taking your talents to go and play in front of all these people who hate us,
Right.
right? But from the stuff that I was seeing that came out after the fact was that he was secretly negotiating to have it so that it was integrated seating, which is kind of like a first step
Right.
into dissolving apartheid, like to show people, hey, like you don't have to be scared. Like we are this, like we're all humans, we're people. So I thought that was important. And then another thing I saw was that he was marching in DC and got arrested during a protest. And then he passed away 5 months later from AIDS. It's kind of
So
very sad ending.
he got it on all sides.
It was a sad ending.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know.
But yeah, they had a bunch of different awards named after him now because, like the Arthur Ashe Courage Award.
Right.
I think they give that out at the ESPYs.
I think I've seen it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Bill Russell got it.
Sounds about right.
Full circle.
Giving them the flowers, they're just like gold if they're gold.
Yeah.
Going back and looking over most of the list, the 64 AFL All-Stars, I mean, it kind of goes a little bit before the other guys we were talking about, but what happened there?
So I really love what they did. So they were in New Orleans for the All-Star game, right? And the black players were refused service, which is a theme of stuff that happens a lot.
Noticing.
So after a while, they were just like, nah, like we're not playing here. And what ended up happening was they moved the game to Houston. So imagine if that happened now, right? So let's say the NBA All-Star game is in Minnesota, right? And let's say, like I know as of now, one cop was arrested. But let's say they didn't arrest any of them. They said we're not pressing charges. He did nothing wrong, all this other stuff. Now, imagine the NBA, like it would be like the NBA players saying, we're not playing here just because of that. And I'm down with it. So, and I could see that happening.
I could see that as well. I could see that somebody protesting like what a particular city or county or anything is doing.
Yeah, and it's different now, just based on the fact that I think I don't know if we talked about this before, but the sense that I got from a lot of stuff that I was reading was when Magic and Larry were having their battles, right? Mm-hmm. Lakers versus Celtics, all this other stuff. You started to get the sense that America was embracing the black athlete, right? Finally. And yeah, and then that went into MJ and all this other stuff. So it went from that, like the protesting that it was in all the way up until like the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. How it was loud, you could see it, to people doing stuff behind the scenes, right? To keep the narrative going, like, yeah, like, oh yeah, everybody loves each other, but still pushing the protest agenda, but just silently in different ways, right? Like, in the Jordan doc, Michael was acknowledging that he got a lot of flack for not vocally supporting all like people and everything like that. And then you hear about how he donated millions to UNC Chapel Hill, and a lot of that money was going to the black students there.
Right.
And you see all that type of stuff. So I feel as though it went from being public, like protests, to private. And then it took another turn again when you got like people like Cap and LeBron and all that.
I'm sure we'll talk about kind of the evolution in a sense, because we're getting a lot of the information right now, but I do want to put everything in sort of like a historical context and try to see, because I know there's a question that we got from one of our fans that as far as like, is there a right way to be an activist as a Black athlete? And I think that when we get to that question, I think it's something to kind of look at. That a lot of these guys did things in a lot of different ways, right? Not everybody held up a fist when they got an award. Activism can take a lot of different shades. And I think there's also the idea of whether or not the person's fighting for themselves or fighting for everyone else. There's a lot of elements to that. And I think that we'll kind of dig through and see who or what methods work. Because I think that there are a lot of people that would say that Michael Jordan, which I want to get into because the next name on the list, but Michael Jordan, from a historical standpoint, was supposed to be, what you hear a lot of people say nowadays is that the athlete should just play because that's sports is what brings us together, right? So
the whole shut up and dribble.
Shut up and dribble. So that what MJ kind of did, especially coming on the heels of The Last Dance, you see that kind of iconic figure that he was. And there's an idea or maybe a concept that if he was more vocal or outspoken, there would have been a large majority of people that couldn't have embraced him because of his outspokenness on certain issues. So it's, can you get the job done in the background and still be this like line as hope for unity and not necessarily rubbing people the wrong way and being too vocal about it? But there was another guy who might have come out of the Jordan documentary with a little bit of controversy, but will stay out of that controversy aspect of it and just speak to a name that was sort of glossed over in the documentary, but is a name that I think is important to know. Craig Hodges. What about Craig? What was Craig Hodges known for other than what we saw in the documentary?
Well, the end of his career was very very symptomatic of a lot of stuff. Well, when the Bulls went to the White House after they won, he wore a dashiki, right? There's a picture of him like shooting a perfect form jump shot because he was like the 3-point leader for like 3 straight years.
Right.
Yeah. And he handed George Bush a letter asking him to, or discussing racial injustice in America, right? And looking at looking at his background, he said that he felt as though he had Angela Davis in his home. He's talking about his mom, right?
Wow.
So growing up in that environment, of course you're not going to be silent when you see terrible things like that going on. So you got that, and then there was another story about the All-Star game. I forgot what year, where before the game, he was he reportedly had a meeting with Magic and Michael, right? Saying, hey, we should boycott this game because of all the stuff that's going on. And since you didn't hear about it, you know the reaction. Nah.
Right.
But the crazy part was that after he handed the letter to George Bush, I don't remember if it was like a couple weeks, couple months, but soon after, he was cut by the Bulls, and then he never got any other opportunities, really, which is pretty odd considering he was the best 3-point shooter in the league.
A little too weird to be a coincidence.
Yeah. And there's other examples of that.
Wow. All right. So yeah, Craig Hodges is known for more than the circus. Fair enough. Now there was somebody that like when we're doing the podcast, I know I'd be the first one to say I'm not a big soccer guy, but it speaks to more than just what's happening in American sports. Tell me about Danny Alves.
My man, Danny. I love Danny Alves just because he's a fun-loving guy, right? But and he does music too. So right now he's playing in Brazil. He could be playing in a lot of different like top-tier clubs right now if he wanted to. But he's playing in his home in Brazil. And I think it was Sevilla. Barcelona was playing a game away, and in soccer, you take corners when the ball goes out of bounds in a certain spot of the field. So he was taking a corner, and a fan of the opposition threw an unpeeled banana at him, right? So it lands like around like his feet, or it hits him or whatever. He looks at it, looks at the ref, picks up the banana, peels this son of a bitch, eats the banana, like tosses it, and then takes the corner. And I was like, that is Danny. There's so many instances of racism in soccer in Europe or football in Europe. And people deal with it in different ways.
Yeah.
So you got examples of players walking off the pitch. There was AC Milan in Italy, which is one of the worst places like for it. And the whole team walked with them that one time. And then you got previous histories in Italy where racism is happening. The black players is pissed, like yelling at the fans, like walking off the pitch himself by himself. And then you got his team full of Italian players and players that are not of color, and then the opposition trying to keep him on the pitch. I hate when I see that.
Right.
Because they don't deserve to watch you. They paid their money to come see you perform the game that you love.
Right.
Because they love to watch you play. There's no reason or no need to racially abuse anyone in general, but in that point as well. Like, you paid to come see me. So I really enjoyed the way that Danny handled it. Because
kind of like bring it on.
Yeah, because like if you're like it's coming from behind him, so he has no idea. Like there's like tens of thousands of people here. You're not gonna figure out who did it.
Right.
And they want to see you be upset. That's why they're doing this bullshit. Like doing monkey chants and stuff like that. They're doing that so you can get a reaction. You pick up the banana, eat it. Like, hey, I won't get a cramp later. and you know what? You're helping me because me not catching cramp will help me be more fresh later on in the game when I can, create the winning goal, which Danny often does.
Is it something is it a recurring thing for him now that he sort of like embraced this like bring it on mentality?
I wouldn't say necessarily just for him. It's a recurring thing for
a lot of these guys.
Yeah. It just really a lot of it depends on where you are. Right. Certain stadiums do certain stuff. Like there was a thing, I think it was in Italy once again, where they had like gorilla suits. Like, and then they had like blow up bananas. Like this goes back to our conversation we had before about Balotelli saying like, hey, we have enough money to build state-of-the-art stadiums in Africa.
Right.
And like get away from all this bullshit. And I can see there's issues with making that happen. But if it does, oh my gosh. That's like strategic exodus.
Quoting that Lupe Fiasco, IG Live stuff.
Yeah.
I got you. Now Danny seems like it takes quite a man to get to have something like that happen and still basically be like, all right, bitches, you're not gonna phase me on that.
Oh, that's him.
Yeah.
He's cool, calm, and collected a lot of times. He gets upset, of course, like, but it's only his anger is mainly based on stuff on the pitch.
Right.
When you start to bring in outside stuff that as you know, like, and I know, you can't control it. Like, you're not gonna know exactly who, unless you're like staring at them when they do it. Right. So if you can't control it, like, you're trying to get me off my game.
Right. No, I agree with that.
Yeah. And it's like players like him and people that make it to the big leagues, there's such a love for the game, right? You're not going to take the one thing that I love the most and I perform every day. You're not going to take that from me.
Right.
So
That's a
much
hell of a
respect
way
to
to
them.
handle it. It's a hell of a way to handle it. It's not necessarily the same way that a lot of the other guys on the list necessarily handle things, but once again, everybody has their own form of activism in that sort of standpoint. Now, I want to get into more things that have been happening recently and kind of tie it into like what's going on right now. I think that when we talk about these things over history, you've mentioned it, that there almost seemed like there was this movement sort of happened. Like the activism has always happened throughout history, but you can tell during times of like certain issues, societal, it translates over to sports and people use their platforms. So the 60s was that kind of era for one moment in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have what I think happening now. You can probably say that this new era probably happens around the 2012 mark with the Trayvon Martin situation. So, but talking about all this, what I want to say is that I want to kind of go from a timeline standpoint. So this new era of things that are happening, a lot of people talk about probably the flag bearer for all of it would probably be Colin Kaepernick. And Colin Kaepernick taking a knee before the national anthem. But what I think a lot of people don't necessarily know is that as far as that type of protest itself with the national anthem, he was not the first athlete to do that at all. And there were two guys that are probably more well-known in the 90s, 2000s that I think we want to speak on, which is Carlos Delgado and Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Two guys, one baseball, one basketball, that didn't necessarily stand with their hat off and hand over their chest in the national anthem.
Yeah, so Mahmoud, like, from what I've read in regards to him, was he viewed the flag as a symbol of oppression.
Right.
So why would I stand for that, right? So what ended up happening to him was he got suspended one game, right? And then after that, he was traded to, I think, the Kings. And then once his contract expired, he never got a workout. And he was averaging like 20 points a game.
He wasn't a scrub.
No. And it's those things that you look at, like, these organizations a little weird, like with a side eye, right? It's like, all right, I appreciate all the things that the NBA is like doing now in terms of like being on the forefront of not hindering the athletes of speaking out, right? But you still kind of got to address this other bullshit that happens, right? Like, I would like to see an apology to Craig Hodges. Same thing with Mahmoud, because their careers ended off some bullshit, and they weren't bad.
Right. Which is something you hear a lot of when it comes to the Colin Kaepernick thing, is that a lot of people will then turn to, well, he wasn't that great a quarterback anyway. That's why
he was in the Super Bowl. He's in the Super Bowl. Why do look at all of the backups? There's a lot.
The Redskins 2 years ago picked up Josh Johnson and Mark Sanchez. That's all I needed to know as far as the Colin Kaepernick thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, what about Carlos Delgado?
Yeah, so he set out the national anthem during 2004 in protest of the Iraq War, right? And when people, like, a lot of people are hell-bent on saying, like, Cap was, like, terrible and all this other shit. I'm like, but he's not the first, right? It's like once people put the narrative that it's against the military, that's when you got all in an uproar. Right. And you can even go back into the 70s, like the Brown University cheerleaders sat out the national anthem in a game in like 1973. So it's not the first time. It won't be the last.
Do you know how much flack they caught during that period?
No, because I don't think it wasn't. People didn't look at it the way they look at it now, right? People
Well, what do
fake
you mean by that?
care. People fake care now about when you look at Cap, like when he first gave the interview, right? People are starting to move the goalposts as to, okay, you shouldn't be sitting down during the anthem. All right.
Mm.
He talked to a Green Beret, a former NFL player. He's like, all right, it's more respectful to take a knee.
Yeah, Nate Boyer, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's like, all right, no, you shouldn't be kneeling either. And then you're disrespecting the flag. But in that first interview, he explained exactly his point.
Right.
All it took was one tweet from the who to spin the
You
whole
can
narrative.
say who.
He's like Voldemort to me.
That's you know what? I like that parallel.
Yeah.
Look at that, 2 black guys talking about Harry Potter.
Yep. So 45, all he did, 45 put out a tweet, his minions picked it up, and then from there it's like, oh, respecting the flag.
And that was,
and it's like they ignored everything else that he said.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that being the because there's a difference necessarily between when we talk about this like contemporary period of like what I said that usually we'll try to start that at like 2012 as far as like this new movement, right? Mm-hmm. And you had things like the Tamir Rice situation, the Eric Garner situation, and you had a lot of athletes that were starting to step out. But I could see that there was a market change in 2012 to around 2016 when you had these athletes kind of doing this in the sense of there were always criticisms that have been over the course of history in the sense of stick to sports, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But there were, I would think that there were more apt to listen and not be as hateful, and it wasn't so vitriolic until 45 comes into office in 2016. And when you had that other rash of police shootings and or police brutalities, the Eric Garner situation.
Put on video.
It comes out. But I think that when you also have the guy who's in the White House calling them sons of bitches as far as the people that are protesting, it became this really, really, really hardcore. I mean, you had people that were boycotting the NFL. Not necessarily boycotting the NBA because we know how the viewer demographics were for that, but there was a lot of things that were happening. I mean, if you look in that area, you had the Kobe Bryants who were wearing shirts, "I can't breathe," right? You had LeBron James was very, very vocal during that period. You had Andrew Hawkins from the Browns. Even if you look at the Colin Kaepernick, Eric Reed, Malcolm Jenkins, even though he caught some flack because of some of the things that he was doing along the lines like what Bill Russell was in the sense of what was happening behind the scenes, right? There's a lot of that stuff happening, but I feel as though from a pushback, I think that what we're trying to figure out, or at least what I'm trying to figure out, is that I can almost see the difference between what I saw in 2012 compared to what I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. And it feels as though the vitriol and the anger towards the athletes have become that much that much harder. Is it because of the social media? Am I losing historical context that all of these guys kind of go through the same thing? I mean, we know Muhammad Ali went through a lot, right?
Well, you also got to remember that we didn't have social media back then, right? And at that point in time, also, there wasn't a fear of if you got caught, right? Nowadays, if you get caught doing some racist shit and Black Twitter gets a hold of you, you might lose your job, like your career. Like the one lady in Central Park lost her dog
and her job.
So and back then it wasn't the case. Like
is there more pushback now because the stakes have been raised? At least there are consequences now on both sides.
I can't say that for certain, just because of the fact that we don't know all the pushback that was happening before.
Right, like we could hear some of the stories. Like I think, like
right,
going into
but you don't know unless you were there.
Right.
Like I hear stories from my grandmother and like my uncles and all that other stuff, but I won't know unless I was there. And the stuff that we may pick up on, or the stuff that we may feel like, wow, it might be nothing to them. So those stories that is nothing to them, but would be something to us, we may not have ever heard because it was nothing to them. So it wasn't passed on.
Fair. And the record doesn't necessarily exist the same way it does right now.
Right. And then if there is a record, who knows if it's accurate?
Fair. Basically, you're looking at what journalists were able to do and everything there. But there were also there were other people that were protesting there during that point too. And I don't want to go too far back, but I do want to at least, it was something I know that was important for you to mention, even though necessarily we didn't hit particular names on the list, was that even back during this period where we talk about this contemporary athlete and being an activist or being vocal about what it is they care about on social issues, there were a lot of women that were also participating in a lot of this stuff there too. I think a lot of only male names have been brought up now, but like you look at, I know that there were the Minnesota Lynx, I think the NBA team, they were very outspoken as far as the national anthem deal, what it is they were doing as far as wearing t-shirts. Are there any other women that you can think of right now that were very vocal or anything over history? Because I want to make sure that they get their just due as well.
I also want to start this by saying the fact that I feel as though they've been grossly underrepresented.
Right.
Just based on the fact that if you look at in the the 20s, and they didn't have a voice, they didn't have the platform to do the things that people now are able to do. So it's unfair to make it seem as though that they weren't there on the front lines.
They had to have been, right?
Right. But it's
like we have all these women's sports, and then you got to think about what roads had to get broken down in order to get, or what doors had to be broken down in order for them to get there. Like, I think we hear about it recently when it comes to the women's national team for the U.S., right? And them wanting pay in comparison to what it is that they're able to generate revenue-wise compared to the men's athletes. And I know that there was a legal back and forth when it came to that kind of stuff, but I just want to make sure that it's not. I think what we want to do is, I think a lot of what it is we talk about, especially because of what's happening right now, is a lot of racial aspects as far as from this. But across almost every line, it's just people want to be treated fairly. They want equal access to an opportunity for them.
And example would be Tie-Dye Pickett and Louise Smith. They were runners back in the 20s, and they went to the Olympic Games, right? They were faster than the people, they were faster than pretty much everyone else there. But when it came time for the actual race, they were put to the back burner so that they could put two other white people on the team. And what ended up happening was the U.S. won, of course, but now they come home and they don't have any medals because they didn't get to participate.
Right.
They don't have a platform because nobody cares. And it's they ended up one ended up becoming a school teacher, and then the school was named after, and then I think it closed in 2006.
I definitely got to do some digging on that.
Yeah, it's there's so much more that should have been said that hasn't been, just because of the times back then.
Right.
Like I said, the social norms have a history of being ignorant. We should know about all these people. So that's where I was.
Well, that kind of brings me to that question that I mentioned that we had one of our fans asked us about, and I think this kind of fits for right now. So we just say the question verbatim: is there a right way to be an activist? The question says black athlete, right? But I kind of want to open it up, but mainly because of what we've talked about. It's going to be a lot of racial overtones on it. But is there a right way to be an activist as an athlete?
Yes.
And what do you think that is?
Just do it.
So it doesn't matter. Like, would you prefer someone to be more vocal, like Muhammad Ali, or do you want someone who does things more behind the scenes along the lines of like a Bill Russell?
It doesn't matter. Just do it.
Hmm.
Don't sit there and try to wait and figure out what you need to, like, the best way of going about it, because you might lose. Your time might go by.
Is it effective?
Yeah.
All methods would you say,
Yeah.
are they effective?
Yeah, because the one of the main things that I get from a protest is disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
Disrupt some shit. Do it. And you can do stuff behind the scenes, like how Bill Russell was doing, like affecting like laws and shit. But you can also be there taking a knee. And then when I was looking it up, there's a photo that Bill Russell posted in 2017 of him taking a knee. And Bill's old. And that shit was fire. I love Bill Russell, man.
So what about the person that says, like, right now we have what's happening, especially with like the George Floyd situation, right? It's been we all have been talking about equal rights for a very, very long time. And I think that there's a difference between being able to sit at the same counter as somebody or be able to date somebody who doesn't look like you. But
let me say one thing then.
hold
on. When you talked about George Floyd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Jackson, right?
Yeah.
He called George Floyd his twin. They knew each other for a long time. They've been cool for a long time. He was from Houston, right? But then he moved out to Minnesota to change his life. And Stephen Jackson was talking about it, saying like the only time, like he was recently talking to George, and he asked him for clothes, right? He's not asking him for money, like, you know how people with rich people, like they have the leeches with them, right? He wasn't one of those.
Right.
If he asked you for something, he really needed it, and he's changing his life. And then there's also videos of him like on Twitter discussing the youth and trying to make a change to the youth. And Stephen Jackson recently did a press conference discussing his friend. And do you want to know who's right next, or who was right behind him?
Who's that?
Karl Anthony Towns. Minnesota Timberwolves starting center, all-star. If he is an all-star, he should be, because he puts up numbers.
Right.
But if you remember, he just lost his mom from COVID-19.
Yep.
And his dad had it too, but his dad made it, thank goodness. But yeah, he's right there. That right there, to me, shows the impact that someone like LeBron has. Because LeBron is this new generation's Jordan. Like, they look up to him the way that before they were looking up to Jordan.
Right.
So
I think it goes to, when talking about everything from like this historical context, it's almost as though you can't have a Colin Kaepernick without a Craig Hodges and a Muhammad Ali and a Jesse Owens, because it takes that first sort of it takes those first steps in order to kind of get you to
I'll challenge you there.
How so?
I think it also stems from their household too.
I don't think that's speaking about it from a standpoint of none of us can gauge what's happening in anybody's household. That doesn't, but it's
I know, but I'm saying, for example, like with Craig Hodges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying how he's always been this way. Like, he's always picked up these fights just because of who he had in his house. He's talking about his mom. Like, he said, like, I had Angela Davis in my house, which was my mom.
So is it just a type of person?
What do you mean?
So is it because, if you haven't, so like right now, what I've been very proud of to a certain degree is, especially in the last couple of days, a lot of athletes have been outspoken about what's happening and have been showing support as far as the protesters and as far as the other athletes that have been more vocal. I think a lot of people are going back to Colin Kaepernick and what he was trying to bring awareness to, right? Now, the way that you're kind of mentioning it, like what I was trying to say was that it takes like these building blocks for you to be more comfortable to be outspoken and to do this. But it sounds like what you're saying is that it has less to do with that and more to do with just who you are and what your upbringing is. Be it that if LeBron wasn't an athlete or if Craig Hodges wasn't an athlete, they'd still be out there doing what it is that being activists and being outspoken. So do you think it's a matter of like certain people that's just how they're wired, or is it certain people that realize they have the platform do take the step out and just do what it is that they think they need to do because they have the platform?
I would say it's both, if not other factors too. Like I can't pinpoint to say like, yeah, if you're this way, this will be the result. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just was trying to figure out why you
Yeah.
challenge.
Oh no, because no, I'm challenging because I wanted to add that on.
I
wasn't trying to say like that's the only reason why. No, I would never do that.
Yeah,
I'm saying like
that. Black on black stuff. It's not cool. Crabs in a barrel, man. Come on.
All right, good two metaphors there.
Just saying.
They weren't fundamentals or mechanics, but
just saying. All right.
Fundamentals or mechanics. Fundamental or mechanics.
I didn't watch it. So I think that what we're looking at is that Colin Kaepernick caught a lot of flack, and he still does, as far as like what he was outspoken about. And a lot of these people that you still go online, and I think Jason Whitlock up until a couple of days ago were still criticizing LeBron James for using his platform to speak about these issues, because what a lot of people want them to do is to just go back and play, shut up, play. It comes back to that.
To be the safe haven.
Well, it comes back to that, the right way to be an activist or what have you, right? As far as you say just do anything. So there's the Michael Jordan philosophy as far as like doing certain things behind the scenes. But on top of doing those things behind the scenes, just kind of being that lovable, united face for the sport to draw people in or to bring people together to create unity or anything. I think going back to the question, I'd actually say that there is a right and wrong way to be an activist when it comes to being a professional athlete. And I would say that if you have the platform, I think it's beholden on you to be outspoken and to be vocal for issues that affect your community. I would say that if you don't, I can understand not wanting to take that risk because it is a risk involved, right? Colin Kaepernick isn't playing in the league anymore. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf didn't play in the league after a while with that. Craig Hodges, after being a three-point champion, is out of the league. So there is that sacrifice that needs to be made, and I wouldn't expect necessarily everybody to make that sacrifice, right? But when they do, I think it creates a situation in which it forces people to have the uncomfortable conversation, and it forces people to deal with certain things, especially if we're talking about the racial thing, that we do, in my opinion, we do a terrible job in this country as far as to shy away from those uncomfortable conversations when we need to have them. I think all this behind the scenes stuff, the slow roll progress stuff, we're kind of showing that, once again, like I said, some progress has been made in the sense of I can sit down and eat at a certain table with my white counterpart, but Lord knows in the eyes of many, many people, just subconsciously, I'm not equal to that person. But it takes those conversations to kind of happen, and those aren't conversations that happen behind the scenes. Would you disagree with that?
I'm saying, all right, my point is saying it shouldn't only be one way, right? Everything, from every aspect. You don't want to be vocal, like only vocal, like just that, but no laws being changed.
So you're talking about solutions. Which is
like that,
of course.
Like my whole point is, if there's an issue, right? This is how I think. This is my wiring. If there's an issue, right? I'm not gonna spend 30, 40 minutes like trying to figure out whose fault it is, right? It's kind of like, all right, how can we fix it? and how can we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Mhm.
Right? That as soon as a problem is given to me, that's that's where I go. Okay, how can I fix it? How can I make sure it doesn't happen again? Right? That's what I think about all the time. I'm not gonna sit there and like worry about like, oh, if this person didn't do this, this wouldn't happen. And then this, and then none of that matters. Where are we right now and how are we gonna fix it?
So that would be my point where I would challenge you on
Okay.
the sense of, say, for instance, what we're talking about right now, which I know me and you we're feeling there's a, I'm not going to speak for you, but I know I'm feeling something right now as
Oh,
far as
sure.
from an
I'm
emotional
probably
standpoint.
I'm
I know
feeling
you are
it
too.
too.
When we're talking about things like the police brutality
Uh-huh.
and the inequity, the inequality when it comes to policing, let's
Uh-huh.
just tuck on that, right?
Okay.
What solutions could you work behind the scenes to do something without being outspoken and vocal about something like this?
Well, I'm not saying like they're not mutually exclusive. I'm not saying you can't do one without the other.
Oh no, I'm not disagreeing with
All
that.
right, all right.
I'm asking. So I think
Yeah,
my
like
question now would
yeah,
be,
I got your question.
what
So like,
what do we do now?
all right, so when I was listening to Lupe Fiasco's live, right? Um, this is just an example. I don't know if it's gonna work. He doesn't know it's gonna work, but it's what he's thinking about at the moment.
Mhm.
Would be to come up with a system that is better than just the police like force itself. To say like, okay, we've had this for this like for this long, it's not working anymore. It's outdated. I have something else that we can use to get the job done without all the negative aspects of using the police force.
How do you get those changes to happen when we're still a minority in the
Well,
country, and
it,
overall, from what we're seeing in the country, because of the way things are, majority of the country are on the opposite side of this spectrum. Otherwise, things would have already changed. No.
I can say that as time is going forward, you can see other people in positions of power um, realizing like, hey, this isn't right and this needs to be fixed. And I think the social media era helped with
Mm-hmm.
this because everything spreads like wildfire now.
So you think things are getting better?
No, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say things are getting more publicized. Like you see it. Like the stuff that we knew about
Yeah.
growing up, now little Timmy down the street knows about it.
Right.
Their parents know about it. Little sister know about it. So it's kind of like, what do we do now? Like, are you guys going to join us in this cause, or are you just going to sit by and be over there and like, oh, that ain't gonna happen to me? But then now
Well,
it's like, all right, what's gonna happen? What does it mean when it happens to your friend? Like, for example, I think it was over in Glen Burnie. Uh, a guy was murdered by his neighbor who was pretty off, and he made complaints that he was being threatened, but nothing happened. And then yeah,
that's right
so
up the road from me.
yeah,
I I can respect what you're saying. I think that from
I
my
just want the shit. Like I look at the end of the day, bro. I just want the shit to change.
and I think that I think we're all
Right.
there, right?
We're at the common ground where we just want the shit to change. I
I
don't know how it's
but
gonna work.
but see, that is the crux of it, right? So like
Uh-huh.
I think that right now, like speaking personally, I feel rage. I feel anger in me. Like I'm usually of the idea that you do what you can to reach across to someone who doesn't agree with you and try your best with like love and connection to get them to understand what it is you're speaking about. But I think at this particular point in time, it's 2020.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about athletes like Jesse Owens from the 1930s that
Mhm.
at the grand core of what they were asking for was just to be treated equal. Now,
Mhm.
it's we've gotten better in certain aspects. Barack Obama's president. He's a half black man. He's a black man as president of the United States. My ex-wife was white. I would have been in jail if that was the case 50, 60 years ago, right? But I think we've reached a point where, I mean, it's 2020 and you want people to have a more woke or understanding of like what it is that we go through. But then again, it was just 4 years ago that they elected Donald Trump,
Yeah.
who has the backing of all of these white supremacist groups or what have you. It's not me saying that every Donald Trump supporter is a racist, but Lord knows if you're a racist, you're probably a Donald Trump supporter, right? Like the fact that he's elected president to me at least shows that that whole thought process behind give it more time, people are going to see it, people are going to wake up, is something that we've been saying for decades, and it
Well,
still hasn't come to fruition.
I can say this part. Um, somebody put it to me this way. Um, the person that you really need to be worried about right now is your like white liberal friend that like voted for Hillary, all this other shit. But
Amy Cooper, the one that was in
yeah,
Central Park, she probably
yeah,
fits all of that description. Yeah.
yeah. That was my thought right there. So when it comes to a point in time when they're challenged by someone that looks like us or a person of color, um, then it goes back to the, oh wait, I don't like the fact that you are talking to me that way, even though I'm wrong. So I'm going to use whatever means that I can to end this argument where I win. And it doesn't matter if you get murdered in the process because I won.
But how do we change it?
I don't know.
And see, this is what I'm talking about, is that the ideal that we're going to continue to do the things that we've done, to me, has shown a proven track record of not working. So I appreciate the athlete being the activist and doing what it is they need to do to bring attention to things, right? But I think right now what you're seeing is that anytime we bring attention to it, we're still getting cast aside as far as like what we're fighting for. Whether it be, okay, you don't like us kneeling, even though we're trying to tell you that we want, like, all right,
Moving
at
the
first
goalposts.
it starts
Moving the
off,
goalposts.
I'm not going to say it's moving the goalposts. It's just, there are no goalposts. They don't give a fuck. It's a matter of, all right, I can show you statistics that say that I'm X amount of times more likely to get killed by a cop than my white counterpart, right?
Sure.
And then they'll say, well, that's just not true. You know, there's a lot of white people that get shot too. So I'm like, all right, try to have the conversation. You kind of tune me out. Some people don't tune you out, but a lot of people tune you out, right? Then you say, okay, I'm going to do something to cause some disruption so they have to focus on me. So you do the Colin Kaepernick thing, or what almost all these athletes that we've talked about do, and they protest in some sort of form, right? They do that, then especially in a Colin Kaepernick situation, we're not talking about police violence. We're talking about the fact that you're disrespecting the flag, you're disrespecting America. So once again, the argument has been tossed out. They're not listening. At least not everybody that needs to listen is listening. So now we reach another point in, like, you even see the protests that are happening right now. When you protest, it's, why are you blocking up the road for hardworking people that are just trying to get to work? You're not going to get people on your side if you do that. You know, you've heard that. Then you have, all right, well, we're just going to burn shit down. Well, now you're just a bunch of savages. So far from what I'm seeing, any way that we try to get our voice across, the people that need to listen and take heed won't do it. So my thought process is an understanding of, kind of, you said, Lupe, Fiasco, this strategic exodus, right? What I look for as far as history, and I see the athlete, I say that we need to get to a standpoint where we understand the power that we do have and we do wield, in saying we're not going to participate anymore. If you had every player on an NFL team the day of a Super Bowl, every black player on an NFL team, and some of the white players that want to be allies that said, yeah, we ain't playing, what kind of disruption does that cause? Now, I know for a fact that there are going to be people that, oh man, these athletes are doing X, Y, and Z. They shouldn't have to have like all this nonsense. But what you could say is that I'm no longer going to participate until you listen to me. I'm out. I'm done. I'm not spending my dollars to make you rich. I'm not giving you my talents for entertainment to make you rich. I'm not participating. I'm out. And I think that that can work across almost every line. Music, movies. What the pandemic to me has really shown is the fact that, look, essential workers run across all different lines. Nurses, doctors, everybody else. But I'll tell you this right now. If every black person said, we're not going to go to the grocery stores to work to help feed you, we're not going to go to the hospitals anymore, we're not going to participate until we know that you're going to listen to us and change things. I think that that is when, I think black people as a whole are entirely too sympathetic. What we need to do is we need to make people understand the hurt. And the only way to necessarily do that in this society, for the most part, is dollars and cents. And I think that we need to flex that power more than we are flexing right now, just to make sure that they not just hear us, but feel us. Because I'm not telling anybody to go to the streets and start shooting up anybody or anything. That to me, it's not, it'd be nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you need to be is in a position to say that we have an agenda. We need political candidates that represent us. We're not asking for what you can give us anymore. We're saying, no, this is what we want. This is what it is, and this is what we deserve. And to go based off of that. If black people left this country or stopped participating in this country, American society does not exist. We created this place. We built it.
Yeah, we built it for free. You need to look at Lupe's life, because a lot of stuff you're saying is the stuff that he was saying.
I agree, but see, that to me is the aspect of what's next. That's my what's next. I am no longer at all trying to convince someone who doesn't see at this point what it is me and my people are going through. If you don't see it at this particular point in time, that your blinders are up and you won't be able to see it because you don't look at me as equal as you. Yeah. I've tried to talk to you, you disregard it. I've tried to protest, you change the subject. I tried to light shit on fire to let you know how upset I am, and you call me a savage.
Yep, because it doesn't affect you.
Exactly. Yep. What I care about, which is my life, doesn't mean as much to you as far as your convenience and you're not wanting to feel uncomfortable. And what I really think is that you have a lot of people, white people, that do not want to be in a position where black people can hurt them economically or anything else. It's very subservient in the way that they handle it, and I'm just completely fucking over it.
Yeah.
But that to me would be the what's next as far as the planning and what have you. But whatever. How are you doing with all of this?
I mean, I have good days and bad days, like everybody else. It sucks being like away from family, right? Because here, there's no, like, I'm like a state away from my fam that I used to see like every weekend. And I mean, when you think about it, like, there's really nobody here that loves me, like, really, right? Except for myself, and then I have like a college friend down the road. Other than that, like, I don't have any friends here. You know what I mean? So when you see all the shit, like, at this point, my only saving grace is just thinking about the future and what I plan on doing with like my fiance and like family we're gonna start and all this other stuff. And I'm just trying to keep myself alive to make it happen. There was an interesting cartoon when it was a white cop and a little black kid sitting at a counter, and the cop looks at him and says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The little kid responds, "Just alive." And it's like, that's where I want to be. And um, so yeah, I'm just trying to do this podcast thing. Like talking to you guys like once or twice a week helps. And hopefully this whole virus shit ends soon so I can go see my fam. So what about you, man?
Like you, good days, bad days. I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I'm around my family. I'm back on my anti-anxiety meds. The depression and anxiety have been a roller coaster. I think my biggest struggle nowadays is like waking up and not and thinking that what's happening is so absurd that it can't be real. Whether it be like the virus, whether it be the orange asshole in the White House saying just inflammatory, just crazy stuff. Like even last night, he said what
When the looting happens, the shooting happens.
the shooting happened, which is a direct quote from George Wallace in the '60s. Like I have a hard time like grasping the reality of the situation. A lot of times, and it I have hope that come November, when we can get more level-headed people as our leaders, they can start to change just the way the rhetoric and the way that we're just responding to people as more of an adult sort of thing. Because right now it just doesn't feel that way. But no, it's a fucking struggle. I mean, I even today, like it's the pandemic was one thing, but then on top of that, you add all this stuff that's happening. I mean, shit, I know the first time they told us to start wearing masks, the first thing that I thought of was I'm gonna get my black ass shot because somebody's gonna think I'm robbing somewhere. And I think Don Cheadle even made a joke about it on Instagram. Like we're trying to be lighthearted about it, but it was like, y'all want us to walk around with masks on our face, and y'all gonna be okay with this? Like it almost felt like it was a setup, right? Like I was waiting to hear somebody was gonna get got from that, and that you add on top of that just all the videos and the shit that's happening and the stories you have. The Ahmaud Arbery thing was just I've been trying to get out of the house and take jogs around the block just to get out, you know? And to think that you had somebody that did that and then
I got a park right by my house.
Yeah.
And I've been here for damn near a year. I have not gone to it. Like I can see the park.
It sucks so much that like
Can't do it.
that's the thing is like you almost get afraid to do it. Like I still do it, but trust me, like I'm looking out of the corner of my eye for anything, right?
Yeah,
and then
but I have nobody here to help.
I get it, dude.
It's me against everybody here. That's how I'm looking at it now.
I know. It's, trust me, phone call away if you ever need somebody to talk to. I mean, we've been kind of doing that, but it's not.
Like the thing is, like if I need someone here, like my only hope would be to see someone else of color and for them not to just sit there and fucking record me dying. that's
just from a personal standpoint, I can tell you about being down in Virginia. I can tell you about the shit that I faced being with a white woman. I can tell you about a lot of the shit that is, but I think right now, I don't feel safe anywhere. Breonna Taylor they shot her while she slept on a couch. Like, I live in Baltimore. Do you know how many times I've seen doors get knocked down and they have incorrect warning information? Like, what stops that from happening to me? What stops anyone from saying that I'm doing something incorrect? And Then I look at the statistics on the coronavirus. It's killing our people more than anybody here.
Yeah,
It's
if you look at the bad habits that we've had since we've been
400
taken here
years.
because of
Yeah.
what we were given or what we were forced to do.
Now, trust me, I'll take personal responsibility of being a fat ass, but still, at the end of the day, it's regardless of whatever the variables and everything entail, it's still, this is where I'm
Yeah,
at.
I still got people in my family who eat chitlins. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, my dad still that. The fucking stinks of ass.
Yeah,
But I think
it
what
is.
what I've been doing majority of the time nowadays is I've been talking to people, and over the last couple of days, it's been a lot of my white liberal friends that have been calling me. They usually start the conversation, "Oh my God, can you believe what's happening?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can believe it. It's kind of coming hard to come to grips with reality of just how overt it is right now, but yeah, I can totally believe it's happening." And a lot of them asked if there's anything that they can do. And that's my favorite question from white people nowadays is what can I do? And I tell all my liberal friends the same thing. I tell them all the same thing, which is I need you to shut the fuck up and let me and people like me tell you what we go through. And I need you to understand it. I need you to not question me. I need you to believe me. I've got no reason to lie to you.
Yeah.
And after you do that, what I need you to do is not lecture me or do any of that shit. Go to your home, go to your family, and talk to them about their belief system and about how they're fucked up in their thought process as far as your extended aunt and uncle you might see around Christmas that says something a little off about Obama, or that says something a little off about that guy that I saw at the store. Like, you got to check that shit. Right now, all I can tell you is the white people ain't really listening to us. And that to me is just, it speaks to right now, there's a lack of empathy in this country that is just trash. American individualism is a suicide pact. It's my favorite line now. It is true. We don't care about our people next to us, and it's going to drive us all right into the fucking ground unless we change it. All right. I have no idea if this podcast was good or not, but it felt almost sort of therapeutic to me, kind of like looking at the history of people that I think one of the things that, like, when I hear Jason Whitlock or anybody criticizing LeBron James is that I get upset. I remember my ex-wife saw me cry one morning because I was reading the comments of people attacking LeBron and Colin. And even though I have some issues with what Colin did as far as like some of the ins and outs, I got upset because here's somebody who got their millions and he's sacrificing it all for me.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going through the same thing as I'm going through anymore. But he's willing to speak on behalf of me. And that means the absolute world to me, that you have somebody that's willing to take that step out and do it. And I think that to understand over history and understand the context of people doing it for us is huge. And I'm going to definitely do more research into it and really, like you said, give them their flowers, right?
Yeah.
You try to do it while they're still here,
Mm-hmm.
not while they're gone. And so I thank you for doing the research that you did do on the athletes that you had.
Yeah. And to anybody who watches this, like, go look at one or two other people that we did mention and look at the people that we did mention. Like, look at some of their accomplishments and stuff that they did. And if they're still here with us, reach out to them and say thank you. That's all I got.
Otherwise, just fucking think about somebody that's not you.
Yeah.
Try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, please.
Be empathetic.
Just
Empathetic.
try. All right, people. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with an episode in like a couple days, but we'll see if we need to do any more of these special episodes depending on how many people watch it. So,
yeah.
All right, James. Nice, man.
All right. See ya.
Peace, everybody.